I had managed to connect myself with the venture firm Sutter Hill Ventures. So a number of the partners there and myself had worked together over the years, and so I joined in 2014 as an entrepreneur in residence. So I left Salesforce to join Sutter, and I joined them because I had been really impressed with the companies that they had incubated and built. I thought they were super interesting in that they not only invested in companies, but they often started them themselves. And as I was joining, just I think maybe about 6 months before, they had started Snowflake. And I got to, during my period there, I was an entrepreneur in residence, I actually got to see Snowflake do one of their pitches for, I think they were raising one of their first rounds. And so I got to see sort of the early demos of the product, got to see the company when it was still largely, I think, a very small team. And Jason France, who's my co-founder, was the other entrepreneur in residence and was actually advising there at the time. And so I got to see sort of how a company, in the very early stages starts getting going and then starts gaining some traction. From there, obviously, we've been, as I built out our own company, Sigma Computing, we built a product that leverages Snowflake. So we are built as a spreadsheet interface to cloud data warehouses like Snowflake and Amazon Redshift. And as part of that, we've been, as you'd imagine, closely partnering with them and seeing a lot of their growth, seeing the traction, the type of customers that they engage with. As you'd imagine, early on, it was a lot of more, early, tech companies. And it's amazing to see now that some of the largest companies in the world are running on this platform. Coming out of Salesforce, as you'd imagine, I was a huge advocate for the cloud. And so I was already had sort of my mind on looking at new disruptions that were going to come in the cloud space, and then seeing essentially Snowflake's pitch of, all of the data moving to the cloud. And what I thought was truly inspiring about what they had done was they didn't just rebuild an existing on-premise product and just run it in someone else's data center. They really thought about, how do you build something in a world where there's only cloud, right? There's no on-premise version of Snowflake. It wouldn't be possible to run it on-premise. And that to me was truly inspiring, because they had a vision of the future of where the world was going, and they structured their product so that aligned with their differentiation, right? That was the way they were going to make their product 10 or 100 times better than the existing products. I think that is, when you're targeting an existing market, like something like data warehouses, where customers already have a data warehouse. So you have to largely convince them that you're doing something that is so differentiated that they should actually eventually move to your product. And so I think Snowflake's vision of the cloud, being able to scale compute and storage and separate them, that was very clearly differentiated. I think the other side of it that I watched from Snowflake is dealing with what I would call the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. So, the sad part that's hard to come out from these lessons is realizing that no one's story of a company is exactly this perfect up and to the right? There are bumps along the way. There are a lot of lessons. And watching the Snowflake team scale, adapt their product, adapt their messaging, scale their vision. So, early in the Snowflake days, it was really focused on a data warehouse vision. And now if you look at, as the company's grown, they've built a broader data cloud vision, the ability to do things like collaboration in the cloud and sharing data. Again, it reinforces having a core vision and then just building a larger and larger vision as you get traction on that. And I think the Snowflake team's done a fantastic job at that. And as you'd imagine, we're trying to emulate that. It's really an interesting thing, because our company went through a very, very similar path, where it took a few years of experimentation to find the right path forward. I think a lot of it is aligning with your investors. So in particular, our investors, which we share with Snowflake, Sutter Hill and Altimeter, are very much focused on long-term building, differentiated large companies. And to do that, they're willing to make investments that could take several years to find the right traction. But that has to be a match between the entrepreneur and the investors. It's also, a challenge for the entrepreneurs. You have to be willing to put sometimes several years and many failed experiments in until you find the right path, and being diligent about scaling, waiting to scale your company until you're ready to do that. So, Snowflake in the early days was 3 founders. My own company was 3 employees for a couple of years. And, once you see the product market fit and once you see the early traction, then it's time to scale. But it's also, it can also be difficult and hugely challenging to accept that you've built something that isn't quite right yet, and you need to iterate and continue to try something different. It varies a little bit by firm. So for Sutter Hill, it was from the start that ideally we were going to build a big company together. And so the notion was not that I was there to necessarily help them on investments or be like a junior VC. It was very much that I was going to try to start something new, but leverage their experience, their network, their and even just sort of that freedom to be outside a day-to-day job and have time to really sort of go explore and talk to people. But yes, the day-to-day was everything from exploring ideas on a whiteboard to talking to people to talking to a lot of the previous companies that had started from there and learning what were the lessons they learned in the early days. And we've tried to, of course, pay that forward and give our own advice to companies that have followed us. But it's an interesting but also a challenging job in that it's very open-ended. It's not that there's a day-to-day where it's like from 9 to 5 you'll be working on here's exactly what to go do. It's much like eventually being an entrepreneur where it's pretty open-ended, and a lot of it is figuring out the path yourself.